So we have lots and lots of questions coming in. Craig, you really hit some big nerves around, I guess, mental health and some of the challenges that happened. There's lots and lots of questions, and if I can start with you, this is a great question, and it says, as a business leader, how do you balance the instinct to look after people with your need to deliver commercial value?
They're not mutually exclusive. I take the adage that you don't, where focus goes, energy flows. So if you're able to focus on the building blocks of success, not success, then success becomes a byproduct. So we have a tool within our business called Office Vibes, so we're able to manage and see a lot of data of how people are feeling and where they're at. I use that every single day to be able to get an insight into how people are and what they're feeling, to be able to ascertain how much pressure we can apply and when to remove pressure from daily life and business. But it comes down to those in teams, the managers of those small teams implicitly understanding their people and knowing the body language and the signs that something's not quite right, and being curious enough to go, how are you this morning? I notice. And that's the bit that doesn't happen. Normally we're just, how are you today? Awesome. Because we always say, yeah, we're great. Actually, I'm shit. So it's taking that next step. But yeah, I don't focus on results. I focus on the building blocks towards success.
Thank you. Lindsay, we're going to hear from you in a little bit, so it's hard to quiz you at the beginning, but I know a lot about what you do and the amazing stuff that Vodafone New Zealand has done. And I think, Paul talked about connectivity being so important. And we went through a time where people are here, people are home, people are balancing their puppies on TV, Craig. I remember that. Do you remember that TV story where your puppy cried the whole interview? It was lovely. So we've all been there. How do you bring people together when they're so far apart?
Yeah, it is super tricky. Within my team, I've got about 500 odd, and it's a balance between sales and engineers, and you're spread all across the country. And so there were a few things that we did over COVID, daily check-ins on Microsoft Teams, for example. And but one of the key elements we had, sounds like similar to you, we have an app called the V-Life app. And so every day we asked our team to check in on how they're feeling, where are they from a location perspective. It also enabled us to send regular messaging out to all of our organisation. And I think a couple of the other key elements we noticed was really you end up sitting on a lot of calls all day. I noticed I was on like 7 to 7, and we introduced a break time. And we said, no, for an hour to an hour and a half, there are no meetings. Because families need to connect with their kids. You've got to connect with your partner. You have to walk out of the four walls and walk around your block and catch your breath. And I think the key thing for us was this concept of keeping an eye on not just physical health, but mental well-being as well. And you're right, Craig, looking at behaviours over a Zoom call and start to be more aware of self-harm, for example, and all of those types of components that started to show as we were going through lockdown. Yeah.
Thank you. Paul, there's been a couple of questions in for you. I'm going to take this one. You talked about, NZ Hot House and the amazing, if you've never been there, it's tomatoes galore. It's incredible. And you talked a lot about the balance of how do you increase productivity. And so the question for you is, how do you think we as a country go about working smarter, not harder? And have you seen any examples of that in your work?
Oh boy, at the BNZ we've got lots of opportunities to keep doing exactly that, Michelle. This is, I think, where this point about learning and innovating, there is so much low-hanging fruit, and sometimes I think we can fall into the trap of thinking that the innovation to improve is, it's the rockets on the moon type stuff, and it's really not. It comes down to mindset in so often. At BNZ, leading bank, we had struggled always historically to get documents signed online. And it's like, that's just crazy. But somehow there was a mindset shift across the organisation. Then overnight, a thing that had always been a problem, we had DocuSign in, so customers could just sign. It seems like the most basic thing. And in retrospect, so, well, how did it take us so long to get to that? But it is now as an example of talk about smarter, not harder, the amount of churn in the system, and there was a mindset shift to say, let's just get on with this, cut through some of the things that can hold back, particularly large businesses, and act more like the smaller businesses that we are seeking to serve every day.
And I think that's a good example for us, because how many of us have had to sign something at the bank and gone, oh, this is so stupid, right? But just done it because you know that that's the system, versus going, how can we work together in a partnership to actually solve this, not just for me, but it will solve it for me, but also probably for everybody else who is having to do this. So thank you for bringing in the DocuSign. Craig, you have hit some nerves, and I'd like to ask you, and all of you, if you have an answer to this, creating a high trust environment in a workplace is incredibly challenging, especially when you have distance. Do you have any tips, or is there anything specific that people can take practical steps in today to create a high trust environment in their workplace?
Yeah, I can imagine it's ridiculously hard if we look at lockdown to try and build that trust when you hadn't had it pre-lockdown. A lot of our relationship building historically has been face-to-face, being able to look people in the eye, because majority of language and how we feel about somebody usually has got nothing to do with the words that they say. But those words are still important as a leader. And I think from where I sit, I try and lead with vulnerability first and foremost, and I've set up half-an-hour catch-ups, and one of the guys in the crowd I bumped a little while ago, and he's messaged me today to say that, hey, we missed our unscheduled, unagended catch-up, can we have one again? So it's those little catch-ups where you find out unique things about people, where you're actually able to spend time, because it's just like kids, right? The people just want time with you, and they're incredibly grateful for it. So for me, that will be the first thing. If your direct team build it, and then they do the same, and it will trickle down so that they at least trust the person that's ultimately responsible for them.
Lindsay?
I think proximity has an emotional element associated with it, and I often hear from customers now, having come through lockdown and out, which are comments like, well, we won't need to travel as much, we won't need to go and visit customers as often. But what we're actually finding is that human element of connecting face-to-face is still really important. And so that won't disappear. We will continue to have that healthy balance of connectivity between ourselves, our customers, and of course our teams.
Yeah, I mean, the question really resonates, and it's been a personal learning for me as well. I reflect back on we had what we talk about as the COVID highs. It was new, it was challenging, we were all in this together, Zoom calls multiple times a day. But then the analogy I've used with my own team is, at some point I came back from a Christmas break and said, you know what, I feel like I've cashed in a lot of goodwill chips. We've been running at such a frenetic pace. And the personal reflection was, team, we've been very task focused, and the things that we used to be good at, in terms of stepping back and saying, how are we as a team, how are we talking about ourselves and taking action on the things that help build trust within our team, and dedicated time when we're together on deliberately about how are we better as a team. And that was something that you could fall into a pretty bad habit pretty quickly in the frenetic pace of COVID, and at least a summer break was a reminder to step back.
I think we underestimate the productivity boost that you're able to get when you nail that.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned the tools and the digitalisation of business to be able to drive productivity, but we've kind of all got similar talent within our organisations, right? But it's our ability to be able to get the best out of each of those individuals as a collective that will stand us apart and drive productivity and innovation as well.
So, final question, it's going to you, Craig, because I think at Xero you have some of the most unique data on businesses around the world, especially small businesses. And so are you allowed to share some secrets? Have you seen, with New Zealand's fewer lockdowns than other places around the world, is that helpful? Is there optimism?
I think what we're seeing in the data at the moment, because of the penetration that we have in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, we're able to get a decent snapshot across. And the other countries are following us, so we're ahead of where they are at because of the openness of the economy. So they're taking learnings from us. The UK is starting to open up, which is fantastic to see. It's been quite frankly a shit show over there and horrible, and I can only imagine how tough mentally it's been for them and their kids as well, not being able to go to school. But we're definitely seeing these green shoots, and there is so many positive stories. But at the same time, there's in the same industry, potentially in the same town, there is some shocking stories.
Yeah.
And it purely comes down to that mindset that Paul was talking about and the opportunity. Who's able to guide these people through what could be an opportunity for them? And there's something missing in our connection with small business to be able to help them through. And the Digital Boost program that MB are doing and Francis Valentine's leading, I think is a step in the right direction to be able to drive people to something, but that's a self-service model. There still needs to be a heck of a lot of hand-holding and guidance that we need to help small businesses show them the opportunity that's in front of them. But we're definitely seeing some green shoots, and we're relatively optimistic, as what we were back in 2008 when Xero was first born. Whenever there is a shock, there is a mass adoption or a mass growth in business startups, and we're definitely seeing that at the moment, which is fantastic. The aim is to turn them into successful businesses and not fail like a good number of them do.
Amazing. Well, Andy Hamilton's in the audience here, so if you're a new startup, go find him. He'll help you go in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, please will you give a round of applause to Craig, Lindsay and Paul. Thank you too.